Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again, Hunter. It's actually a pleasure to really be here and kind of speak on, in front of a big crowd. But so I've actually been with Vizient, family companies for about 7 years. And how I got here, I actually started out in oil and gas, actually, and my background is in supply chain. And due to the layoff at oil and gas, just going through this job search, and I had the opportunity to work for one of the infusion and therapy service and management company here in Sugar Land, Texas. And that kind of opened up the doors to not only the medical field, but also the GPO world. And then that's how I got, the opportunity to work with Vizient. And I have to say, for me personally, this is where my calling is my passion is in the medical field, and I don't see myself going back to oil and gas. So that's how I landed here.
Fun fact, my boyfriend is from Sugar Land, Texas.
Oh,
Yes,
Small world.
the place of the strange two-colored lake. You know what I'm talking about. It is some local drama, everybody. One part of
Nothing
the
makes
lake
sense.
is green, one part of the lake is undyed. Which side are
Nothing
you
makes
on?
sense.
Tech, what's going on? How are you?
Hey, Hunter. I'm trying to. I should have done jumping jacks before this to get to your energy level.
Oh, you know what's hilarious is I recently got an Apple Watch and it's continually reminding me that the decibel levels are high and it's me talking.
Oh, you're damaging your own hearing. That's wonderful.
It's like, it's at 90. You should be in a quieter environment. I mean, like, you're telling me to be quiet is what's
There you
happening.
go. There you go.
So, how did you get to where you are, Tech? And tell me about where you come from.
So, how do I answer that question? So, I'm remote. So, to get to where I was, I kind of rolled out of bed and just walked into my office. Is that what you wanted? No.
He's good. He's got jokes, everybody. He's awake. He did some jumping jacks. Don't let him fool you. He's a
There
shark.
you go.
You.
I've been with Vizient for about 2 years now.
Hmm.
I've spent the better half of, I'd say, 12, 13 years working in healthcare.
Hmm.
Most of that time, so I'm based out of Orlando, Florida. I spent time at the health system side, so working with clinicians and employees on the health system side. Sometimes at the bedside with patients, but I'm not a clinician by any means. I did not get that part of the DNA. My sister got all that.
Hmm.
But so I've been passionate about working in healthcare, most of that time working in like the customer and patient experience space. So just trying to improve healthcare specifically for our patients, for all of us and our families and so on and so forth like that. But then in the search of finding what's next, how do I make a bigger impact on healthcare? How can I become a greater part of something that's much bigger than all of us? And roads led to Vizient, and here I am. And I haven't looked back. It's been a great decision personally, but for my career as well.
Yeah. How do you feel like each day you get closer to that or you achieve that, helping people in ways with that ambition that you described?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. It's tough, right? Even when I've had teams for me, one of the things that I usually preface with them is, if you're used to instant gratification, that's not something you get in what we do, especially in healthcare. So
Mm.
on the one hand, you're changing somebody's life immediately in that day, in that moment. But in reality, we're making changes, and Khan knows this because we're a little far removed from it, so we might not ever see the fruits of our labor. But
Mm.
hopefully, those kind of make their way back to the people that we touch in our own lives, and whether it's faster, better access to care or more empathetic care, whatever that looks like for them, or more cost-effective care. Hopefully, we had something to do with that, right?
How do you feel about that, Ka?
I really do have to agree with Tech. I mean, he's right. I really, hopefully, the clinicians and those who are on the front line helping saving lives, hopefully we are making the impact of that, whether we see it or not, but that's always our goal,
Mm.
and we're here supporting the hospital systems, ensuring that they're giving the best quality care, while, managing and helping them their bottom line as well. So.
Mm. So I'd love to talk about your experience at Vizient and what have you witnessed and participated in and how Vizient embraces and celebrates cultural diversity in the workplace. And have you noticed any positive impacts that that has on the folks a part of the Vizient family and the team? Tech, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. It's still fresh for me, right? Because it's only been a
Mm,
couple of years, and
mm,
um, working in a lot of different organizations, both healthcare and non-related, there's something different that I noticed immediately here. It's obviously the first thing was representation, whether it was the group that I onboarded with or just starting to network and meet different people within the organization. People like I've seen it just more representative people that look like me and have shared lived experiences, right?
mm-hmm,
But then even up to the leadership level, it's not something that I've seen before.
mm,
Like I said, I grew up out of Florida. I grew up in South Florida. I moved up here, and so it's a pretty diverse community here. But that said, even in healthcare, not a whole lot of perceived representation. But then this is not by accident. It's not a coincidence. This is kind of hardwired throughout the culture and really the DEI framework for how Vizient does business now. And it's a strong belief for me. And I've always said this when I worked in the hospitals is, we've got to be a mirror of the communities that we serve. And I think that Vizient realizes that.
yeah. And Kai, you said you've been with Vizient for 7 years, is that right?
Correct. That's correct.
So with a little bit more of time and experience, and you're also working in the office, is that right? On the ground, or you do hybrid?
I do hybrid. I have the fortunate opportunity to actually go on site with my member here. We call them members in the supply chain team, supporting them in
Mm,
every capacity. Yeah.
mhm.
Mhm.
So having that experience of being both in the office, working from home, and having the time of 7 years working at Vizient, what have you noticed that the embracing, the celebrating of diversity, and how that has impacted your efforts specifically?
So Vizient encourages us to be our true authentic selves, to foster our individuality that brings value within an organization. I mean, they celebrate and embrace cultural diversity with various programs, initiatives, and events. Like for example, earlier this year, they held a luncheon for with the APDA DNA that program that we have here, and they hosted, at the Irving office, and they brought in entertainment, cater food, and that really highlighted the significance of Lunar New Year for the Southeast culture.
Mm,
And the organization was very intentional in recognizing and celebrating that, and which validates how important inclusivity is with the visit within Civic Vizient. So that's what
mm.
I think. Mhm.
Tech, did you say you're solely remote, or did you say you're hybrid as well?
So I'm in Orlando. Most of my team is in Chicago, and then a lot of
Uh-huh.
my other colleagues like are in Texas. So
Yeah.
I do get to travel and see my team, but unfortunately, I don't get to partake in the wonderful celebration festivities that happen in
Yeah.
like our Irving office. Yeah.
So as a remote worker offsite that visits more, how do you seek that out? What
Mhm.
keeps you going and feeling like you're part of that culture and your
Well,
team?
obviously, I have to live vicariously through my colleagues, but I don't. While I do sort of feel like I'm missing out on some of the awesome food and the physical, camaraderie.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm missing out on being included.
Mm,
Um, you know, I'm part of our DNA, our Diversity Network Association, and we get together and we get to share stories, and Vizient gives us a voice, and they care about our voice, and so that alone, I mean, speaks volumes. Obviously, there's times I'd like to be in the office, and I do get some of that chance, but I don't feel like I'm missing out. I feel like I'm part of the culture. I'm integrated, and you know, they haven't forgotten about me or anyone else that's working remote. We're very included. They've done a fantastic job there.
I'm glad to hear that because here at Power and Fly, we're completely remote and we're all in different places. And
Mhm.
honestly, I feel most connected when we're doing events. I mean, I'm part of the event team, but this is when we're all like, hey, how's it going? We're talking and da 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 on all these Zoom calls. And then it does take a little bit more activeness on my part to make sure I stay engaged uh, as someone who's, you can close the laptop at any time. So I got to make sure I open the laptop when needed, right? Yeah. And Kai, you mentioned that Vizient really you feel encourages you to be your authentic self. And how does that show up for you on a day-to-day basis when maybe there isn't a holiday, but perhaps just, a Wednesday?
I think one of the things that I really do appreciate is when I'm with my team, whether it's on site or off site or at a conference and whatnot, like it's I can just let my hair down, right? And just kind
Mm,
of be like, and they're like, that's just Claude doing her, and there's just no sense of judgment. There's just it's gonna be okay. And so I think that's what it is. And they really foster, they appreciate the feedback, what we have to say as well, whether it's, improvements or, opportunities here and there, or just to check in how we're doing as well. And so,
right. Yeah.
mhm.
So let's get into it a little bit now. I would love to dig into what stereotypes, challenges, and biases do you feel API professionals continue to face in the workplace, from getting hired to advancing up the ladder? Tech, you mentioned how in healthcare and specifically, there maybe isn't wide representation. So how do you feel about that in the context of this?
The first thing, and obviously there's some personal experience here, but I think also, just anecdotally and in general, the biggest barrier that I see is really as an API trying to move up the ladder,
Mm,
whatever that looks like for us, right? It's the higher you get up the ladder, the less representation there is.
mm,
And I'm a strong proponent. You got to get the right person, the right leaders for the job. But the reality is, the way our upbringing was, kind of our genetic predisposition is, our we speak through our work. It's head down, self-discipline, do great work, and it's going to pay out for you. But we all know that there's much more to that dynamic as you try to climb the ladder and
mhm,
get promoted in your careers. And so you don't see as many AIPI representations. At least I haven't, um, on the health system side. And so it's refreshing to hop into Vizient and see a little bit of that here.
mm, mhm. How about you, Ka?
For me, as a Vietnamese American woman, I do find myself, having to compete against my male counterparts. And I kind of do see that there isn't enough diverse representation within the leadership role. And so I kind of see that there's a general reputation gap there. So that's one of those challenges that I do see.
Mm, mhm. Do you feel, you said, Tech, you were speaking to, I think you said it's in your DNA to you show yourself through your work, right? Head
Mhm.
down. And if that's part of how you were brought up with your culture and your work ethic, are you faced with stereotypes against that, of how people might perceive that and make it more difficult to go up?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's kind of part of that, AIPI monolith where they believe they have a general understanding. There's going to be some unconscious that bias that plays into that, right? And so you kind of fit into a mold of where they think you're supposed to be.
Mm,
Um, and if you don't, sometimes they're not sure what to do with you,
mm,
right? Um, and most of my experience, as a second generation, that's kind of my perspective on it. And I think it's especially more difficult for our first generation AAPI that are still in the workforce now. I
mm,
think our third generations and beyond that, they've figured it out a little bit more, right? They have a lot more cultural or bicultural integration into it.
mm,
But it still remains a challenge because, um, we're it's been that model minority sort of stereotype that exists,
mhm,
and where we currently represent, but it's to Ka's point, it's not been in leadership and senior leadership positions.
mm,
That remains a challenge.
yeah.
And I do want to add to Tech's comment, like, yes, it's a part of our culture, just kind of keeping that humility. So we often don't really we do the work, and then but we don't often give ourselves a lot of credit. And that kind of hinders
True.
us from making that roadway for ourselves as well.
Mm,
Mhm.
mhm,
Mhm.
Internal conflict for sure.
Mhm.
mm, mhm. Earlier today, I had a speaker that was speaking to this dynamic, and yet we know here often the squeaky wheel gets the grease, he said. And there's that conflict of, how do I speak up? When do I speak up? How do I learn to do this? Has there been tools, people, mentors, cohorts that have helped you on that journey if that's been difficult, or do you help other people with that as well? Ka.
Yes, actually, for me, yes, I actually have a friend and a colleague, and she's a co-chair of Women with, with for Vizient. And one of the things, one of the advice that she's given me that kind of stuck with me is that as a woman, we tend to not see what we've done within our role and kind of limit ourselves on what we can do. And so which is then it causes us not to apply for roles that we definitely know we can do. So
Mm,
she's like, going forward, maybe look at yourself as if you can do that job at a honest 80%, just go for it. Don't hold yourself back. And that really has helped me get out of that mindset. Like, you don't have to be 100%. You just have to be 80%. And if you know you can take it and run with it, don't be afraid to do so. So that's given me a lot of confidence, and I really appreciated that comment. So yes.
yeah, I love that because nobody's actually 100%.
There's
It's
no
just some
grace.
people pretending to be who go for it. How about you, Ka? Have you had relationship dynamics that have helped you along the way, or something that you share with maybe or excuse me, tech folks that have helped, that you help? Do you have maybe younger folks that you've been helping along the way?
Yes,
You know,
funny enough.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Kyle.
And so funny enough, a couple of weeks ago, one of the contract specialists here on site, she asked, how did I get here? And it's not a lot of people ask me that. So I was like, let me take a moment to really think about how I got here. But she was looking on how she can, get herself to where she wants to be and kind of climb that ladder, right? And I was
Yeah.
able just to kind of give her like, network, don't be afraid, step out of your shell. It's okay to be, go ahead, get into that group, talk, it doesn't matter. And if you want to be a part of something, speak up. And so, those little things that I wish someone would have told me when I first started in the workforce. So yeah.
That's
Mhm.
awesome. Paying it forward. How about you, Tech?
Yeah, no, Kyle, you're being too humble again. You have a lot to share. I will say I wish, and I haven't up until this point. I've had mentors, right? I've had a lot of fantastic. I've been so lucky to have fantastic leaders in my life,
Mm,
but I've not had a mentor that shared lived experiences.
mm,
Right? We've not had the same upbringing, and so you learn what you can from your leaders, and they've challenged me as in my career growth to and this just happens to be one of Vizient's values, but to be more bold and to
mm.
speak up and to believe in yourself. It's not, it's we just, to Kyle's point, raised to be a little bit more critical of ourselves. And so having that confidence and being willing to challenge the status quo, because the other side of this is respect for authority is always a huge thing in
Mm.
API culture, right? And so
Mhm.
it's that balance of, yes, that, but we still need to challenge the status quo to get the full benefit of being more creative and innovative and driving change. So
Yeah. I love hearing about these relationships that you've had in different ways. And you're also talking about how Vizient celebrates different cultural identities and holidays and all that. And then I'm also curious about perhaps the ERGs, the employee resource groups. Are there ones that you are connected with and that you are happy to be a part of here at Vizient? And what does that look like? Popcorn style. Who's first?
you've been here longer. I'll defer to my senior first.
She's like, never call me your senior ever again.
I guess I feel like for me, I feel like if you really take the initiative and be bold and going out there and just picking up the phone, and that is the one thing that Vizient is really great about is, hey, if you are interested in something different, if you want more exposure to something, don't be afraid to pick up the phone, to call that director, call that VP, call that manager. It doesn't matter. I feel like here your title doesn't matter when it comes to helping each other
Mm,
get to where we want to be.
Mm,
And so, and Vision's really great at that. So if I can guarantee you, if I were to speak to my manager, which I have, like, hey, I'm interested in this, who can I speak to that can help me guide me to that, that career path? And he's quick to give me the name, and he's like, call her, reach out to her. She's very nice, she's very friendly, she's always open to help. And then, and then on top of that, Vision is not, they're very welcoming if you want to shadow like another totally different department just to see how that goes. And I've seen it firsthand with someone that I used to work with. She wanted to look into marketing options. And so they actually brought her on board to plan one of our biggest events that they had for the year. And, and that's up to her to decide whether or not she wants to take that goal. So I think that's one of the things that Visit really pushes. They're not very shy about, and they just, it's a lot of an open door policy here in that regard.
mm-hmm. I love that. Has there been a moment where it felt for you, Ka, that you're like, oh, this is looking back now, is there a definitive moment when you felt that Vizient really had your back and supported you and your and encouraged you in your diversity and living your authentic self that helped you in your personal growth and your confidence and your comfort level?
Yes. So long story short, I was when I first started with Vizient, I was on site at a different capacity for the non-acute world. And the hospital system at that time decided to bring in a consultant to kind of help cut costs. And one of the position was they wanted to end was my contract. And I was freaking out because I was within my first year. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And so my manager at that time, he kind of, talked around, and, they were able to say, hey, we have a different position on a different team for you. We're here to help you, support you. You do what you need to do. And they made an exception for me to be remote and allow me to work within that team, to be the only remote employee, and allowed me to keep my, and to be supportive of them in a different capacity. And so I was able to keep my job. And I think by doing so, it showed that they supported me, they were there for me, and they understood, the need behind it as well.
That's huge. And that was before the normalizing of working remote. If that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
6 years ago. Yeah,
yeah.
you were ahead of your time. Have you Tech, I know you've been there 2 years, but have there been
Yeah.
moments so far that you feel, yeah, I really feel like that Vizient has my back today?
I feel like that's generally every day. I mean,
Mm,
they've built the culture from the top down, and you have the right people in the positions. They hire people that are not just accepting, right? It's not enough just to say accepting, open arms, come on in, but it's like a continued intentional way of making people feel like they belong,
mhm,
and creating psychologically safe work environment and culture. I mean, that's invaluable. That's you create a space where people can create and respectively challenge. I kind of talked about that earlier, but I feel like in my role at Vizient, I've had the freedom to grow, professionally, but also just in the amount of work that I've been able to do and the opportunities I've been afforded. But at the same time, like, I've been able to be in groups with people that are like me, that look like me, and share, our vulnerabilities, and that's great, and it's celebrated. We're not checking a box here,
mm,
and
mhm.
that is refreshing, because there's so much more to it. And even then, we're still barely scraping the surface, right?
Well, in the last couple of minutes, I'd love to hear about that. So, looking ahead to the future, how do you envision Vizient continuing to lead the way in promoting DE&I and within the organization? And what opportunities do you see for further enhancing the workplace experience for all employees? Ka, as someone who's been there for a little bit, was your take on that?
um and Tech mentioned earlier that we're barely scraping the surface, and I do agree. And I think there's so many opportunities, and as the new generation comes in, I am sure there's going to be more amazing feedback, more opportunities to think broader and how we're going to be more inclusive. And I think that's where the opportunities would be, is like or the like the second generations, the third generation coming in and see, having their input and seeing how they feel about, how we can better and be more inclusive. Okay. So I think that's where I would put that at.
Yeah, really getting that feedback from that,
Mhm,
all of those, and especially that, like you said, the third generation that's coming in, because they're going to
mhm.
have a whole different perspective of their lived experience coming into the workplace. Tech, is anything you would like to see for down the road on the roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know that this is actually specific to Vizient. I think it's something that we can all learn and work towards. So there's two concepts. The first, there's a concept of a higher reliability organization where you improve consistency and in the case of healthcare systems, safety, but that is built on a foundation of psychological safety. So I think that there is significant overlap and interplay between having a really solid DEI culture and working towards being a high reliability organization. The second part of that, I think, is a little bit more AIPI, is we can get better and more intentional about listening and creating listening and making it easier to listen to people that may not be confident or willing to speak up and
Mm,
share their personal experiences and feedback and things like that. So I think those things together are just incredibly invaluable to take DEI to the next level, whether it's at Vizient or anywhere else.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both for making the time today. This has been absolutely wonderful. I hope we get to do it again. And for folks that want to keep the conversation going with you, is LinkedIn the best way to reach out and connect with y'all?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, Ka, make sure you take care of that Green Lake over in Sugarland for me. And Tech, is so good to see you both again. Thank
Likewise,
you so
Hunter.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take
Take
care.
care now.